today's program by Center for Knowledge Sovereignty, CKS. CKS is an established think tank and has been spreading awareness about data sovereignty and cybersecurity.
Assess the trajectory of US foreign policy's flight and plight. There came jolting.
We see the rejection of the claim by China on the South China Sea.
I welcome you all to today's program by Center for Knowledge Sovereignty, CKS. CKS is an established think tank and has been spreading awareness about data sovereignty and cybersecurity at strategic, political, and national levels. CKS is a non-partisan nationalistic think tank which has been spreading intellectual content with focus on the spheres of technology, public policy, and research. CKS is honored and privileged to host from its platform third season of this time, 6-part series of webinars talk, Thus Spake Generals. Today, in our concluding talk, we are honored to have a very highly acclaimed and distinguished personality, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, Executive Council Member, Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis, President, Institute of Global Studies, Distinguished Fellow, Ananta Aspen Center. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar acquitted his responsibilities in the Indian Foreign Service for 34 years. He was Ambassador of India to Kazakhstan, Sweden, and Latvia, and has worked in senior diplomatic positions in Indian embassies and missions in Washington, D.C., Brussels, Moscow, Geneva, Tehran, Dhaka, and Bangkok, and also at headquarters in India. He negotiated for India in the Uruguay round of multilateral trade negotiations and in India-EU, India-Asian, and India-Thailand free trade agreements. He contributed significantly to strengthening strategic and economic ties and promoting cultural cooperation between India and USA, EU, Russia, and other countries. Ambassador Sajjanhar worked as head of the National Foundation for Communal Harmony to promote amity and understanding between different religions, faiths, and beliefs. Ambassador Sajjanhar has been decorated by governments of Kazakhstan and Latvia with their national awards and by Universal Peace Federation, New York, a body in special consultative status with the United Nations, with the title of Ambassador of Peace. Ambassador Sajjanhar writes, travels, and speaks extensively on issues relating to international relations, foreign policy, and themes of contemporary relevance and significance. He appears widely on TV panel discussions. Now, I request Air Vice Marshal Pranay Sinha, VSM retired, moderator of this session, to take the program further. Viewers, AVM Pranay Sinha, in his 35 years of distinguished career, held many important appointments, and post-retirement, he has worked as advisor to Bharat Electronics Limited for about 3 years and is now appointed as strategic advisor of prestigious IIT Mandi. He is also an active member of our think tank. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, madam. For info of all, Dr. Deepa Prakash, an ex-CSI scientist from CFTRI Mysuru, is presently the Director, Research and Development of Kadamba Group and one of the greatest pillar of strength of CKS India. Good evening, viewers. Happy Ashtami to one and all. What an unprecedented time we are in, viewers. As the world was grappling to stabilize its economical bearing that was severely impacted and disrupted due to the Wuhan virus, there amidst this pandemic arose a revisionist and expansionist power of Red Dragon, China, challenging the US hegemony that was as such on wane. Its rudderless foreign policies were evident in AFPA and Middle East arena. And by the time geostrategicians of the world could assess the trajectory of US foreign policy's flight and plight, there came jolting thunderstorm that made the rebels of Ukrainian cities fly helter-skelter and Russian rebels on downward plunge. This Russian crusade over Ukraine not only challenged and changed the contours of the world order, but it demolished the global institutions, dismembered and fragmented various world's groupings, treaties, and alliances. Every country was forced to defend their self-interest. Gone with the winds were the care and consideration of other nations. And there we heard the Parliament Vani, Dr. Jaishankar Uvacha. Atmanirbhar Bharat with reduced dependence on external world is the only way ahead for India as the world changes, as the world order changes. But then, ladies and gentlemen, how prophetic were the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, who propounded in 1882 three metamorphoses in a life cycle, an allegorical imagery of the camel, the lion, and the child. In his seminal composition, Thus Spake Zarathustra, he declared that a dragon is the great barrier of true spirit and freedom, and lion must take on the dragon to capture the freedom. Come circa 2022. The lion is metamorphosed into Atmanirbhar. But then, allow me for bragging that at CKS India, we were visionary enough to conceptualize Spake Generals based on influential work of Nietzsche to make you all understand the geoeconomics, geopolitics, and geostrategy of rapidly changing global order. But again, more foresighted we were to invite in the season 3 seasoned diplomat par excellence for the concluding talk as the comments of George Clemenceau, the French premier during World War I, that war is too important to be left to the generals, got refreshed due to the ongoing Russian ballet of destruction in Ukraine. Yes, statecraft needs deft handling. It has potential to shrink or shore up the country's fortune in the fast changing global order. And who else can explain this better than the erudite exponent of statecraft, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Air Vice Marshal Pranay Sinha, for this very generous and gracious introduction, and also for the invitation to deliver this concluding talk, concluding remarks on the third session of the Thus Spake Generals organized by the Center for Knowledge Sovereignty. Let me also express my deep appreciation to Deepa Prakash ji for your very gracious introduction. I am delighted, of course, to be here, and I'm extremely happy that I have this opportunity to address this very erudite, learned, knowledgeable, and also experienced group of professionals. So the subject, as has been mentioned by Air Vice Marshal Sinha, is India's role in the changing global order. How do we define the changing global order? Do we take it from the time just a couple of months ago when the Russian attack on Ukraine took place? Do we take it, that was a seismic event, of course, for world affairs. And I'll speak about that in some detail. Or do we take it to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic that took place in the beginning of 2020? That was a black swan event and had a huge impact on world affairs and on global relations, health, education, etc. I would, however, like to go a little before that to see how the global order has been evolving and how events like these seek only to accelerate the transition that has always been taking place. After this short account of the developments over the last 18-20 years, I will speak in some detail about the present situation after the Russian aggression of Ukraine, and then end with India's role as far as the changing global order is concerned, put it into context as far as the current day developments are. And after that, of course, I very much look forward to the discussion, which I would see is the most exciting part of our interaction. So let me commence with the 9/11 attacks that took place on the United States, the World Trade Center towers in New York, in Pennsylvania, on the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. on the 9th of September 2001. That was a watershed moment for the world because in a manner of speaking, in more ways than one, in fact, it represented the end of the unipolar moment. Because the United States had been reigning supreme over the world since 1991, when the Soviet Union disintegrated and broke up into 15 constituent parts. And after that, for 10 years, it was the unchallenged power in the world. But 2001 represented the steady decline after that, which was referred to by Marshal Sinha also. Then we come after 2001. I would like to focus on the subprime mortgage lending crisis, which took place in the United States in 2007-2008. A large number of very significant financial institutions of the United States, of the West, they went under. Some of them were badly damaged. The others ceased to exist, like the Lehman Brothers. We had Bear Stearns also. We had Citibank also. We had Goldman Sachs also. All of them suffered very badly. But along with that, the economy of the Western countries, whether it is America, whether it is Europe, it is Japan, all of them suffered badly. And this subprime mortgage lending crisis, or the international economic and financial crisis, was followed by the sovereign debt crisis that afflicted Europe after that. Along with that, we also witnessed the rise of China. China had joined as a member of the World Trade Organization in 2001, and it signaled its arrival on the global scene through its coming out party in 2008 with the Beijing Olympics, which were touted to be the best organized and very well managed Olympics that had been held till then. This is followed by the assumption of power by Xi Jinping in 2012. In 2013, Xi Jinping launches the Belt and Road Initiative. In 2016, we see the rejection of the claim by China on the South China Sea by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in at The Hague. I'm sure all the listeners here would recall that because of the claims of China spanning about 2,000 kilometers from its own borders, Philippines had taken China to the Permanent Court of Arbitration, and the decision came out in 2016, completely rejecting all the claims that China had made at that time. In the meantime, China had also overtaken the US economy in purchasing power parity terms in 2013. It accounted for about 19% of the global economy, and it had overtaken the US economy in 2013. Of course, at that time, and even more recently, it was suggested, it was predicted that China would be able to overcome the US economy even in nominal dollar terms by 2026 or 2028. That is another 4 or 6 years from here. But more recently, just a few months ago, at the beginning of this year, we've had some studies which would seem to suggest that China has fallen into a middle income trap, and so it would not be able to go over the US economy in nominal dollar terms before 2033 or so. So this is something, of course, there are so many imponderables going forward because there is so much of change taking place in the world. So we'll have to keep this under close watch. In the South China Sea, as I was talking about, China has gone about militarization of the large number of islands that it has acquired illegally, which according to international law, that is the UN Convention on Law of the Sea, they belong to other countries. They belong to Philippines, they belong to Vietnam, the Paracel Islands, the Spratly Islands, the Mischief Reefs, and it started militarizing them. Not only that, it started also constructing artificial islands in South China Sea and also militarizing these islands also. This resulted in the revival of the Quad, which comprises of the United States, India, Japan, and Australia. This, as I'm sure all the participants in this group would be aware, was set up in 2004 in the wake of the tsunami, which struck the southern parts of the Indian Ocean and even Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and Thailand, and some other countries on the 26th of December in 2004. But after objections from China, no further action was taken. So this was revived in 2017 on the sidelines of the East Asia Summit when US President Donald Trump was there. And also the concept, the strategy of Indo-Pacific was also launched. And then we had in 2020, early 2020, we had the COVID-19 crisis that resulted in immense damage to the whole world in terms of the economies of the world, in terms of health, in terms of social systems, employment, malnutrition, health, mental health issues. So that had a huge negative adverse impact on the world. And it was only that the world was getting ready to come out of the clutches of the after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic that we had the Russian attack on Ukraine at the beginning of this year, exactly on the 24th of February. Now, before I get to that, we also need to see the note the US disastrous exit from Afghanistan, which took place in the middle of last year, and that has dented the US prestige and clout and reputation a great deal. During this period, of course, there was a huge number of writings on the impending potential conflict, likely conflict between the United States and China. I'm sure several of the participants in this group would be aware that one of the well-known US political scientists, Graham Allison, he wrote a book in 2017. And the title of that book was Destined for War. Can America and China escape the Thucydides trap? Now, Thucydides is a Greek historian who lived in 5th century BCE. That is about 2,500 years ago. And he wrote in a very scientific manner about the war between what is known as the Peloponnesian Wars, which, between Sparta and Athens. And this war took place between 431 to 404 BCE, if my memory serves me correctly. And what he had postulated was that the background of the war was that Athens had started rising after the Greco-Persian wars in 480 and 490 BCE. Athens had started rising and emerging as a very significant power. Sparta was already an established power. So the theory that Graham Allison gave was that if there is a established strong power already existing and there is an emerging power, then this established power will launch an offensive against this rising emerging power to defeat it so that its hegemony and its dominance does not get challenged. Of course, this thesis by Graham Allison has been disputed and challenged by several other political scientists like Joseph Nye and others. But still, it is useful to keep in mind that we have an established power, established hegemon in the United States, and we have an emerging challenger that is in China. So this is the sort of background that has been with us over the last 20 odd years as to how the global order has been evolving. There has been transitioning from first the unipolar moment, then the rise of China and the challenge of China as far as the United States is concerned, and challenge to the global world order also. Before I proceed further on the developments as far as they happen on the Russian attack as far as Ukraine is concerned, let me say a few words about India. And on this, first, I would like to emphasize that in 2005, we entered into a framework agreement with the United States on the India-US civil nuclear deal. And in 2008, with the very strong support of the United States, we were able to obtain a unique waiver from the International Atomic Energy Association and in Vienna, and the Nuclear Suppliers Group in Vienna, which would permit India to engage in global commerce in nuclear material, nuclear technology. This was something that was unprecedented because India has not signed the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and yet we were given this possibility because of our sterling track record in terms of not being proliferators and having indigenously developed all our nuclear energy. Now, during this period, the last 22 years, in fact, since the visit of the former president, US President Bill Clinton to India in March 2000, relations with the United States have seen a steep upward trend, a steep increase. In fact, in 2010, when President Obama came speaking in the joint session to the Indian Parliament, he said that the India-US relations will be a defining partnership of the 21st century. Of course, some of the participants here might also recall that in 1994, there was a book that had come out by one of the US ambassadors in which he had termed the relationship between India and the United States as estranged democracies, which means both the countries are democracies. They share similar values, but they are estranged because our perspectives and views on very many bilateral and global issues were very divergent. However, when Obama came in 2010, he termed the relationship, as I said, as a defining partnership. When Prime Minister Modi was invited by President Obama and he addressed the joint session of the US Congress in June of 2016, he called the relationship as an indispensable partnership between India and the United States. So we can see how the relationship has evolved. And he also said in a more sort of lyrical way that there is a new symphony at play between the two countries. So after that, several new agreements, very far-reaching agreements have been signed, what are called MOA, COMCASA, BECA. The United States has become a major defense partner of India, starting from absolutely a negligible level about 10 years ago. United States today is the second or third largest defense supplier to India, about $22 billion it supplies. It is we have the highest bilateral trade in goods and services. We also have a large number of working groups on different areas of activities, whether it is renewable energy, agriculture, health, education, cybersecurity, high tech, all issues of interest and concern are included in these working groups. We established the 2+2 relationship between the two countries, and irrespective of which party has been in the White House in the US or has occupied the Prime Minister's office in India, the relations between the two countries have continued to grow. And of course, all of us are aware that Prime Minister Modi is taking over the administration, the helm in India in May 2014. That has given a very strong impetus to the bilateral ties. With Russia also, our ties have grown. And I will just give one example that on last year, 6th December, we have been having annual summit meetings with the Russian Federation. This started in 2000. So for the last 20 odd years, we've been having these annual summit meetings. They could not take place. The summit meeting could not take place in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in 2021, we had President Putin coming to India on the 6th of December last year. And although he was in Delhi only for a few hours, but the fact that he made the effort and expended the time and energy to be here, to come from Moscow, to take forward the partnership, to have discussions with Prime Minister Modi, I think this very effectively demonstrates and testifies to the importance that Russia also attaches to the relationship with India. And I think it would be interesting for our listeners, for all the participants to know that this was the second meeting of second visit by President Putin outside Russia in 2021. Before that, he had gone out of the country only in June 2021. Before when he went for a meeting with President Joe Biden to Geneva. So this is the importance that Russia also attaches to relations with India. There are, of course, with Russia also, we have a large number of areas: defense, nuclear energy, hydrocarbons, space, Arctic, Central Asia. There are a large number of areas of cooperation. There are some areas of discord. One is in the field of growing relations of Russia with Pakistan. Also, the position of Russia on Afghanistan, which earlier was quite divergent from India, but now it is coming much closer. And of course, there is anxiety in India as far as Russia's growing relations with China are concerned. In fact, relations with Pakistan are also issues of concern for us as far as the United States is concerned, because they also, although Pakistan has been supporting terrorism, has been supporting the Taliban, Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan and killed by US forces in 2011. But still, the US maintains very strong relations, and also on the issue of the manner in which they left Afghanistan was a matter of concern for us. Lastly, on the issue of China, also, we had a big setback in our relations as a result of the Doklam standoff in 2017. It was a 73-day standoff from June to August. And then we had the clashes, the first after about 50 years, which took place in 45 years, because the last casualty on the border was in 1975. So this took place after 45 years. We lost 20 of our soldiers. They were martyred. And according to different reports, China lost anything between 45 to 105 of its soldiers from the accounts given by either the CIA or by TASS. But China acknowledged that it had lost only 4 of its soldiers. So the relations with China at the moment are in a manner of freeze. Lastly, India has very effectively dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of numbers of positive cases, numbers of casualties, development of vaccines, in terms of the applying vaccines to our population. More than 90% of our population has been given the double dose. The triple dose is also, the booster or the precautionary dose is also being given. Our economy has been on an upswing. In 2020. It went down by about 6.8%, but last year there was an upsurge of 9.3%. Also in the current financial year, it is going forward. Now let's come to the current situation as far as Russia's attack on Ukraine is concerned. And as I'm sure everyone here is aware, has completely shaken up the security architecture in Europe. The implications for the world economy and security are also immense. Russia crossed the red line on the 24th. The United States, the United Kingdom, and some other European countries had been saying that for quite some time that Russia is going to launch an attack on Ukraine. Russia, however, had been rubbishing all these statements, saying that these are what they were doing on the eastern side of the Ukrainian border are routine exercises. What they were doing on the northern border with Belarus are also routine exercises. And they said that this was something similar to the United States warnings when it had given about the WMDs, the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that they would be proved wrong. But then we saw that on 24th of February, Russia launched its military offensive from three sides in Ukraine, what it euphemistically called special military initiative that it has launched. Now, of course, one could say that the original sin, as far as the action by Russia is concerned, was committed by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So Russia calls it the special military operation. So one could say that this is the original sin was committed by NATO, because NATO has undergone an unbridled expansion. If in the middle of 1990s it was the membership of NATO was 16, then by over the last few years the membership had increased to 30, and there was also a very or that is what Russia thought, that there was a great likelihood that Ukraine will also join NATO, and that would become an existential threat as far as Russia is concerned. But of course, we had seen that there was a number of visits to Moscow from leadership in the United States and also leadership of Europe. We saw President Macron traveling there. He traveled twice to have discussions with President Putin. We saw Chancellor Olaf Scholz going there, also having meetings with President Putin. Antony Blinken going there, senior officials of the United States going to Moscow and having conversations. And I think by and large, all of them did tell Russia that Ukraine is not likely to get membership of NATO. But what Russia had said is that it wants guarantees in writing that Ukraine will never be admitted. Now, of course, it is a moot point, and we could discuss whether the retribution that was given was commensurate with the original sin that I mentioned that was committed by NATO, or the possibility, or what was considered as a possibility by Russia, that Ukraine would become a member of NATO. Because we have seen that there have been so much of destruction, so much of damage to infrastructure, so much of deaths and violence. The other point that one could ponder over is that could Russia have achieved its objectives without war? What it is getting now, could it have achieved its objectives? My own assessment, and I have written extensively on this, is that yes, it could have, Ukraine could have been given the status like Finland. Finland is also, it's a neighboring country of Russia. It has, it's not a member of NATO. It is a neutral country. It is a member of European Union, but it is not a part of the security arrangement. But it appears that President Putin allowed his emotions to get the better of him. He had made these comments just before the offensive that Ukraine has never been an independent country, has never been a separate country. It has always been a part of Russia. Ukraine has no right to exist. It is necessary to denazify and to demilitarize. And also it is stated, some people, some Ukrainians suggest that he also said that it is essential to de-Ukrainize Ukraine. That means to evict all the Ukrainians from there and make it into a part of Russia. Of course, Russia has said that it was not interested in regime change. It is not interested in acquiring the territory. But still, there has been lack of clarity as far as objectives of Russia are concerned. It was initially thought on 22nd February, when Mr. Putin announced that he had given independence to the two breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, that Russia would have limited objectives. But the attack on 24th February, which I said launched the special military operations, as a result of that, Russia's and Mr. Putin's credibility came crashing down because Russia had been maintaining for the last 1 year that it is not going to attack Ukraine. And the stand of the United States stood vindicated that Russia was getting ready to attack Ukraine. Now, Russia possibly might have thought that it would get a cakewalk when it moved into Ukraine, because it moved with a pincer-like movement from the south, from Black Sea, Sea of Azov, from the east, from its land borders with Ukraine, and from the north through the borders with Belarus. It would have thought that, like it was able to announce the independence of two states in Georgia, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, it would have thought that, like in 2014, when it was able to take over Crimea without much of an opposition, it might have thought that, like in 2015, it launched the offensive in Syria, and there was not much opposition from any quarter. So Putin might have thought that this time also there would be no great resistance either from the country concerned or from the international community. And I think that is where was the huge miscalculation by Mr. Putin, because where he might have expected that the Russian troops and forces would be welcomed with flowers and chocolates as liberators, the Ukrainian army dug in its heels. The people came out to preserve their independence, their integrity, their sovereignty. And against that, the Russian army has entered into a stalemate. So this, I would say, is the first miscalculation, that he expected it to be an easy ride. The second miscalculation, I think, seems to have been the range of sanctions that have been imposed, in terms of the scope, in terms of their depth, in terms of the intensity. I don't think this would have been expected by Putin, although the Americans and the other countries, they had mentioned in no uncertain terms that the sanctions that would be imposed on Russia would be the highest ever, would be the most stringent ever that have been imposed on any country. And we have seen what has happened. Whether it is in the area of finances, Russian banks have been removed from the SWIFT banking operations, whether it is in the area of oil and gas, the Nord Stream 2 has been, its clearance has been withdrawn. And this is going to have huge impact, maybe not in the immediate future, but going forward, it is going to have a huge impact. So all these sanctions, the intensity of the sanctions maybe was not foreseen, and how badly it is going to impact upon the Russian economy. The third aspect, the third result of this has been that it has this aggression by Russia on Ukraine has unified NATO and the transatlantic alliance as never before. Definitely not since the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So what is the situation today? Firstly, it is a stalemate. We have, Russia has suffered losses in men and material. We saw in the newspapers today that the advisor to President Putin has said that it is very tragic that Russia has suffered huge, significant losses in men, and also as far as economic sanctions are concerned, they are giving a lot of pain as far as the economy is concerned. So this is a result of the war. And what we can see now is that the Russian military and power stands diminished today and humiliated. It's Russia's prestige standing and clout stands dented, stands tarnished, and stands bruised. So Russia has also lost considerably. Ukraine, of course, has lost hugely, but Russia also has suffered greatly. There is also a stalemate on the economic front, although Russia has been able to, by saying that it will accept payment for its oil and gas only in rubles and making rubles convertible. So that has also, we have seen that while the ruble dipped to a level of about 130 to $1, it has recovered somewhat to the extent of 85 to a dollar. So there is a huge impact, of course, of this on the world. Oil and gas prices have shot through the roof. They went up to 130. Then today they are close to 100. The prices of food, wheat, grains, all of that have suffered. There have been huge supply chain disruptions, and that is having a very adverse impact on a large number of countries, particularly on developing countries. There is the impact of this is limited not only to Europe, but it is spreading to other parts of the world also. We see that Russia has changed its objectives. It has not been able to take Kiev, but now it is moving its focus and its attention on the eastern part, that is Donetsk, that is Luhansk, that is the Donbas region. We've seen the bombardment in Mariupol, in other places. It has removed its forces to the east. Russia has moved its forces. And I think the next few days can be very ugly and very bloody as far as this is concerned. Very quickly, let me look at some of the lessons that some of the countries have drawn. I think as far as China is concerned, it has been watching. It will not let go of its no limits partnership with Russia. All of us are aware that there was this no limits partnership that was agreed to between the two countries when Putin visited Beijing at the beginning of February for the Winter Olympic Games. China wants a strong Russia so that it can withstand the pressure from the West, from the United States particularly. We see that different countries in Europe, they are increasing their expenditure on defense. Germany has announced that it will increase its defense expenditure, military expenditure from 47 billion euros to 100 billion euros. We've just read that Finland is, which has not been a member of NATO, as I mentioned, is planning to apply for membership of NATO by the end of this month. Sweden might also do so. There might be other countries in East Asia, like Japan, like South Korea, like Vietnam, who might start thinking of becoming nuclear weapon states, because they have seen that Ukraine, which had the fourth largest nuclear arsenal after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, it gave up its nuclear arsenal in 1994. And then we see what is the situation that it finds itself in. While other countries like North Korea and Iran, which have nuclear weapons, they are able to have this deterrence as far as attacks from other countries are concerned. So these countries might also start considering actively about going nuclear. Now, let me come quickly to this is how the situation as it prevails today. I have tried to cover it in a brief because obviously the time is not adequate to go into any great detail on this. But let me, I'll be very happy to respond to any questions or comments that you might have. But let me spend the last 10 minutes or so that I have on the situation as far as India is concerned. What is India's position? What is India's role? And I would like to start with what the manner in which we have acted, the manner in which we have conducted ourselves, both in the UN Security Council as also in the UN General Assembly. The last voting on which, discussion on which took place just 2 days ago, that was on a resolution to expel Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. So India has abstained. At the macro level, we can say that India has abstained in all the 10 votes that have taken place. But I think it will be useful to keep in mind, after the vote, there is always an explanation of the vote that is issued by the country. And in our explanation of the vote, till the 22nd of February, we had been maintaining that the legitimate security guarantees of all countries need to be given due consideration, need to be respected. This really implied that Russia had legitimate security concerns as far as the unbridled uncontrolled expansion of NATO is concerned, and the Western countries need to have a look at that. After the 22nd of February, we have been focusing on the inviolability of the UN Charter and the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, because that has been violated by Russia through its attack, through its aggression. The territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine has been violated. So, in a subtle way, we have been expressing our dissatisfaction, our displeasure to the Russian Federation. And the same thing was done when discussions took place on the issue of the massacre in Bucha on the north of Kiev, where we said that we unequivocally condemn the massacre in Bucha, and that there should be an independent investigation. We abstained in the UN General Assembly because we said that the due process had not been followed, that there was no investigation that had been conducted. And although Russia had also claimed that this was not done by them, but this had been done by the Ukrainian forces, although there seems to be very little evidence to prove that, but still to maintain credibility, it would have been useful if an independent, a time-bound, within 2 or 3 days, a time-bound independent investigation had been conducted. And also in terms of the substance, there have been, this is being rather selective because there are also human rights violations, for instance, in China on the Uyghur Muslims by the Chinese authorities, by the Chinese state, and still no action is taken by them. So we expressed our concern on the substance as well as the process, and we abstained. But we have been maintaining our position that the UN Charter, its inviolability must be maintained. Then we have seen that there is a flurry of activities. There has been a flurry of visits to India. We have seen the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov coming to India. We saw the British Foreign Secretary, which is the British Foreign Minister, Elizabeth Truss, coming to India. Also the Deputy NSA of the United States, the Special Representative of the European Union from Germany, the Japanese Prime Minister, and all of them wanted to bring India to their side. India has been engaging with all of them in a very proactive manner. I would like to say that India is neither neutral, nor is it a bystander, nor is it a fence sitter. India is a very proactive participant in all discussions and in all decision making. And that is why we find that so many major countries of the world are keen to engage with India. We have explained our position to all our interlocutors, and basically we have voted in favor of protecting, promoting, and safeguarding our own interests, while also promoting peace, security, and stability in the world. When our Prime Minister has spoken to either President Putin or to President Zelensky, he has always spoken about a cessation of hostilities, cessation of violence, negotiations, using the path of diplomacy and dialogue. And we want to maintain very strong relations with the United States. As I mentioned earlier, we have a comprehensive global strategic partnership with the US. With Russia, we have a special and privileged strategic partnership, and we want to maintain both of them. We have strong relations with Russia in the area of defense, which we wish to maintain. That's a heritage legacy relationship that we want to maintain. And also, when the prices of oil have gone up, we would like to import oil from there. We import just about 1 to 2% of our oil requirement. And we have noticed that the oil purchases and imports by Europe are much more than what India is importing. We have refused to be cowed down by the threats of anyone. You might recall that When the US Deputy NSA was here, he said there would be consequences if India gets too close to Russia or India engages in some payment mechanisms which tend to circumvent the sanctions. We have explained our positions, but we have stood to promote, to protect our own interests. Similarly, when Russia said that an abstention at the recent UNGA discussions resolution would be considered as an unfriendly act, we have stood by with our abstention and explained this position also. So we have safeguarded our interest, and if we look at it, we are being affected by the war, although we are not a direct party to it. The oil prices, we have seen the petrol prices going up. Inflation in the recent report issued by the RBI governor on the state of the economy, inflation, he has said, will increase from 4.2% to 5.7%. Still manageable, but still it is going up. The GDP will come down from, expected to come down from 7.8% to 7.2%. Of course, it is a matter of satisfaction that the absolute poverty in India is very low, as the IMF has just come out with a report that the absolute poverty in India is below 1%. Also, government has been supplying grains for the last more than 2 years to more than 700 million people in the country. So there is no difficulty as far as feeding our population is concerned. So we are keeping the inflation in check. We are focusing on growth by investing in infrastructure in a big way. And the last point I would like to make is that India's growing global profile and status lends great weight and authority to its voice, to its views, and they are listened to with great respect by the international community. We've seen that in the UN Security Council, where India is a non-permanent member, as also in our interactions. Day after tomorrow, our defense minister and external affairs minister will be in the US for the 2+2 talks. After that, they will travel to Tokyo for the 2+2 talks. So I would like to finish my presentation here. But then this subject is such a vast subject that it is very difficult to condense it in such a short time. But let me once again thank Air Vice Marshal Pranay Sinha for this opportunity to speak with you, to interact with you, to address you. And now I am ready for any comments or questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for this mesmerizing talk. And yes, you can go on and on. Sir, you have painted the canvas of the global scenario right from 20 years, right from 2001, the 9/11, and we came down to the Russian crusade. But yes, sir, you have rightly said the unbridled expansion of NATO, the sin committed by them, the provocation by US, despite Georgia and Ukraine not qualifying as a NATO membership, George Bush offered them the membership of NATO, and the credibility of USSR has come down. That is, you have observed, sir. What is worrying to us, sir, is no limits, no partnership, dealings of China and Russia. But unequivocally, yes, sir, you have said, and that's what our viewers should note, that India's neutral stand should not be construed as a fence-sitter. We have safeguarded our interests, and we are the voters of promoting peace, security, and stability in the region. And our voice and views are being heard by the international community. The flurry of foreign minister visits is the testimony of this rising and emerging global power. Sir, but there are questions from our viewers. Can we trust the strategic partnership of US, especially with respect to Quad, though the 2+2 dialogue is started, sir, or going to start. This is the question from our regular viewer, Mr. Dharamveer Jangalaji, sir. Can we trust US, sir, now?
Marshal Sinha, this is a very important question. So maybe let me take
Yes.
it alone. Let me take it sort of, by itself. I think that's a very valid question because, our memory goes back to 1971 when we had the, USS Enterprise coming through the Bay of Bengal, when the war for the liberation of Bangladesh was going on. We had the, to intimidate and to threaten India as far as that war was concerned. And also the sanctions that were placed in 1998 when we had the nuclear tests. And there are so many other examples. The denial of the cryogenic engines to India. So the question is very logical to ask, can the United States be trusted? And I remember I had many of these conversations when I was posted at our embassy in Washington, D.C. And I would like to say that, at that time, let's say up to about 2000, we had a commonality, a similarity, an identity of values. Today, we have an identity of interest. And I think that is what needs to be realized. I would also like to give you the example that when there was this discussion that was going on in 2008 at the International Atomic Energy Agency to provide a unique waiver to India for commerce in nuclear technology and nuclear materials, then China has stood like a rock in our way in terms of getting this unique waiver. And it was at that time that the then US President George Bush, he did the heavy lifting. He called up Mr. Hu Jintao and told him to, temper down, take back his opposition. So I still remember that the discussions took place on this on a Saturday. China absented itself, but at least we were able to get this waiver from there. And right now also we see that China stands in the way of India's becoming a member of the Nuclear Suppliers Group, as also a permanent member of the UN Security Council. But we have the support of the United States. As far as interests are concerned, the most formidable challenge for India is China. The most formidable, decisive challenge for the United States is China. So both the interests of both the sides, both the countries coincide. And that is why, when Prime Minister Modi in his address that I mentioned, 2016, when he addressed the US joint session of Congress, he said, we have given up the hesitations of history. There were these hesitations. Can the US be trusted? And I think today we are on the same page as far as the global issues are concerned, and on the issue of the Quad, and the sort of focus that has been given, the sort of importance that has been given to India in the Quad and the Indo-Pacific. I think that means that, one can never speak for eternity. Things can change. But last point I would like to make here is, if we have to safeguard our interests, we shouldn't be looking out at anyone else. We have to become self-reliant. And in that context, this Atmanirbharta and this, not being reliant on external agencies, countries for import of weapons and armaments, we have to make ourselves reliant on all these aspects. Thank you.
Sir, similar questions, of course, is that do we go for any other groupings or alliances, though foreign policies doesn't dictate that, like BIMSTEC? Do we for to counterbalance China? This is the question, sir. And then another question has come, sir, that the UN has become irrelevant. Global institutions have become dysfunctional. So what can be and how the world order will be balanced in future? Do you see a rise of any body, sir, to govern and to counter the emerging China threat? These are the two questions, sir. And as a last question, I will just ask you, this is very interesting, that if the push comes to the shove, sir, which side we should bank? Do we go to the trusted, privileged partnership, or we go for the strategic partnership where the symphony has started playing?
Okay. So first is in terms of whether we should go in for alternative groupings,
Yes, sir. This is a pure sectional question.
BIMSTEC
Yes, sir.
and the others. You know,
Yes,
India
sir.
has been following a policy of multi-alignment. That is, we have on issues based, wherever we have convergences, we will work with those countries. And so, you know, with different countries, we have also issues where we don't agree fully. As I mentioned, as far as the United States is concerned, on the issue of Pakistan, we don't agree with them fully, but we agree to have a conversation with them. When we meet them, we will tell them of our concerns, but we take what their position is. But the areas of convergence, we try to take them forward. Similarly with Russia. And this is exactly what we were doing with China also, till the time that China started amassing all these 50,000 troops and tanks and aircrafts on our border. So our policy has been of multi-alignment, and we have been part of a large number of groupings. So we are members of BIMSTEC, we are members of SCO, we are members of RIC also, Russia, India, China, although that might not be serving, or BRICS, that might not be serving any major purpose at this moment. And that has actually proved to be a very good, very effective pressure point on China. You would recall, and your participants would recall, that when we had this standoff in Doklam in 2017, then it was a fact that China was going to host a BRICS summit in Xiamen on the 4th of September, that we were able to come to some sort of an agreement on the 28th of August of 2017. This time also, since China is to host the BRICS summit in the coming months, we had the visit of Wang Yi also coming here. So, you know, that can serve as some sort of a leverage also. Now, some people also suggested that India is going to be the chair of G20, so Xi Jinping might not come. So, but my own personal view is that if Xi Jinping doesn't come, it will be to his disadvantage, because there will be 19 other world leaders who will be coming to India for the G20 summit. So it will be a good opportunity to interact on that basis. India has, engaging with multitude of countries. You would recall, I'll just give you one example. You would recall that when the G20 summit took place in Buenos Aires in 2018, on the sidelines of that summit, we had two meetings. One was called the RIC, Russia, India, China, and the other, Prime Minister Modi termed it as JAI, that is Japan, America, India. And these sort of informal gatherings took place in Buenos Aires in 2018 and in Osaka in 2019. In 2020-21, of course, no meetings or no G20 in-person summits have taken place. We'll have to see when in 2022, when the summit takes place in Indonesia, as to what happens. But the point I'm trying to make is that India today is following a multi-alignment policy. So we are trying to relate to different countries on areas where we can work together with them. And that has proved to be extremely successful. Southeast Asia, West Asia, Gulf countries, with all of them. The second question is, UN has become irrelevant. So I'll put two things. I think one is that as the multipolar world becomes a reality, because so far what we have had is either a bipolar world during the Cold War era, or the unipolar world from 1991 to 2001 or 2008, whatever you might wish to call it, and now the rise of China. But I think now it is the time of the multipolar world. There are a large number of middle powers that have come forward that are asserting themselves, number one. Number two, I think this will make it quite clear to the world that the United Nations needs a reform. because the Security Council and the working procedures of the General Assembly, which were decided in 1945, they address the realities of that time. They do not address the realities today. Just to give you two examples, at that time, the membership of the UN was 53. Today, it is more than 190. But still, in terms of the membership of the UN Security Council and the membership of the permanent members, the either in terms of the numbers or in terms of which countries are there, that has not changed. While the world has undergone a huge change, and I think it is in that context that a reform and a restructuring of the Security Council and of the General Assembly is very much called for. The last question that you said was which side should we go to? I am, this is a hypothetical question, and one could speak in hypothetical terms, but I am quite certain that it is not going to lead to a direct conflict or confrontation between Russia and NATO or Russia and the United States. As I mentioned in my commentary also, that Russia has also decided to limit its objectives. Now it is withdrawing from around Kiev and the western parts. It might foray into the western parts to some extent, but by and large, it is withdrawing from there and concentrating on the eastern part. Because, it's a 40-mile long, 64-kilometer long convoy was not really successful in, bringing Kiev to its knees. Also, the fact, right at the beginning, you would recall very well, Marshal Sinha, that refuge was offered to Mr. Zelensky, both by the United Kingdom as well as by the United States within 2-3 days. And Zelensky said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying here. So today is 40 plus days, and he appears every evening to speak to the press, to speak to the media. So I think this sort of resilience on the part of the Ukrainian people, army, and its leadership, I think this was not expected or foreseen either by Russia or even by the West. So I don't think it is going to result in uncontrolled conflagration. So it is in the realm of hypothesis, and so I would like to leave it there. But I would be happy to engage with you in a conversation subsequently when we have a better knowledge of how things are developing. But I'm quite certain that having seen the writing on the wall and Mr. Dmitry Peskov saying himself that we have suffered significant losses in terms of our troops, and we are suffering huge pain as a result of the economic sanctions. I think the Russians and Mr. Putin will see the writing on the wall, and they will try to bring, to limit their objectives and to bring this conflict to an end as quickly as is possible. Thank you.
Thanks for that sobering thought, sir. And once again, thank for this mesmerizing talk. Now I request Madam Sumitra Goenka, Director, Rate in Infotech and CEO Triangle Global, one of the strongest pillar of our CKS India, to give a concluding talk and say a few words. Also propose a vote of thanks. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Namaste and a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I wish to thank our guest speaker, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar ji, for a very interesting address on the subject of India's role in the changing global order. We hope, sir, you will be back with us soon on yet another engaging talk shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, during the COVID lockdown and over the past 2 years, CKS has organized several webinars under different themes, and one such theme is Thus Spake Generals, conceptualized by veteran AVM Sinha sir. With today's talk, we complete 3 seasons of Thus Spake Generals, focusing on strategic geopolitical issues. We are honored to have several dignitaries as our speakers on various subjects during our 3 sessions, such as Lieutenant General PR Shankar, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain, Vice Admiral Sekhar Sinha, Air Marshal SS Soman, AVM Dr. Arjun Subramaniam, Air Marshal Anil Khosla, Lieutenant General Dipender Singh Hooda, Lieutenant General Zamiruddin Shah, Vice Admiral Anil Chopra, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, Air Marshal D Choudhary, Rear Admiral S.Y. Shrikhande, and finally Ambassador Sajjanhar. I wish to thank all our speakers once again. I wish to make a special mention of our chairman, Lieutenant General Dr. D.B. Shekatkar, Vice Chairman, Lieutenant General V.M. Patil, Secretary Mr. Vineet Goenka for constantly guiding us in CKS. I appreciate the efforts by AVM Sinha, Dr. Deepa Prakash, Dr. Nagaratna, and Mr. Paresh and other team members for making this event a grand success. I finally thank all the members of the audience present with us today and all the viewers who are watching us on our social media channels.